Hello guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about animated text inside of After Effects. Click on our text layer and reposition the anchor point into the middle. Move around 5 frames ahead and keyframe the scale to 100. And at the beginning of our composition to 1000. We're going to do the same with our opacity. So at the frame number 5, keyframe it to 100 and move back a couple of frames and keyframe it to 0. Now we have the start of our animation. You want to easy ease the last keyframe on the scale just to make things a lot more smoother, and open up the graph editor. Now we want to make the same thing at the end of our text to make it disappear. So keyframe the scale to 100, move a couple of frames and keyframe it again to the value of 50. Open up the opacity, keyframe it to 100 and move it all the way down to 0 for our text to disappear. Here we have our initial text coming and going. We can duplicate this layer and move it about where our first text disappears. And you can change the inside of this layer to whatever you want. On the Effects and Presets panel, you want to search for the typewriter effect. Basically what this does is create a typewriter effect for your text, and the effect does most of the work for you. If you open up the properties of the layer, here you're gonna see the keyframes of our animator, and you can just play around with them to make the animation a lot faster if you bring them closer, or you can make the animation slower if you bring them apart. Open up the properties of our layer and add a tracking animator. Move a couple of frames ahead and set a keyframe the track amount to 0 and go to the beginning of our composition and keyframe it to the value of 10. Open up the opacity and somewhere in the middle keyframe the opacity to 100 and at the beginning of our composition keyframe it to 0. Here we already have the base for our animation. You want to make sure to easy ease the last keyframe of the opacity to make things much smoother, and also open up the graph editor. You can always play around with the keyframes to make the animation more faster if you bring them more closer. With our shape tool, draw a rectangle beneath our text layer and set our text layer to alpha inverted. Now you want to add a position animator and bring the text all the way down until it's not visible anymore. You want to keyframe the end to 100 at the beginning of our composition and move a couple of frames ahead and keyframe it all the way to 0. Easy is the last keyframe and open up the graph editor. Here we have an animation where the text is coming from right to left. If you want to change the direction of the text, you can just do the same but with the start. So you can keyframe the start at the beginning of our composition to 100, and if you move a couple of frames ahead, you can keyframe it to the value of 0, depending on the direction that you like. And again, you can easy ease the last keyframe and open up the graph editor. Right-click on our text layer and create a shape from text. You want to remove the fill and add a stroke and put the value of the stroke to around 5 pixels. You want to open up the properties and add a trim paths effect to our outline. We're going to keyframe the end to 0 at the beginning of our composition, and a couple of frames ahead, we're going to bring the value to 100. And as always, easy is the keyframe to make things a lot more smoother. We're basically done with this layer. We're going to make the text layer visible, and we're going to play around with the opacity. So right when our outline is complete, you want to keyframe our text to 0 and move it a couple of frames ahead to 100. Easy is the last keyframe, and open up the graph editor. Now, for less detail, same as the previous animations, you can just play around with the space of our keyframes to make things more slower or faster. Click on our text layer and add a scale effect. We want to keyframe the offset at the beginning of our composition to -100 and move a couple of frames ahead and bring it all the way up to 100. Move the scale to 0, and on our advanced options, change the shape to ramp up. Put the value of ease low to 75 and ease high to 25% to make things more smoother. And here we have our initial animation. To add more details, duplicate the animator, open up the properties, and you want to bring the scale to above 100. So in this case I put 160, and I'm gonna offset the keyframes. You want to play around with the value here, and if you're not happy, you can always change the scale amount and bring it down to 150. And here we have created a wobbly effect. You can leave it like this, but I want to add another animator, so I'm gonna duplicate this one, and I'm gonna bring the value to below 100 in this case. Again, open up the properties and offset the keyframes. Now, you want to make sure that your animation looks right, so you want to play around with the value of the keyframes. You can change the scale value, you can bring it up or down, depending on your text. But now you already have a base for your animation, and you have added the details. You just have to play around with the value and the offset of the keyframes. Open up the text properties, and on the more options, you want to change the group and alignment to go to the middle of our text. And you want to add a scale animator, opacity, and a blur. Change the scale value to 0, the opacity to 0, and the blur to around 35%. Open up the advanced option and change the shape to ramp up. Ease low to around 80% and ease high to 30% to make things more smoother. Here you want to keyframe the offset to the value of 100 at the end of our composition and to -100 at the beginning. Now if we play that back, the letters are animated in their own order. But if you want to change the order to something more random, you can just turn on the randomizer. And now we have our letters coming up in a random order. And you can bring the keyframes closer to make the animation more faster. But also, if you want to change the order which the letters come up, you can just play with a random seed here. Thank you guys for following to the end of the tutorial, and make sure to subscribe for new videos.